Hello, everyone. It's Mega Champ once again. Most of my end of the year lists have finished now, most of them, and now there's only one left. There's only one left. I've given special awards to anime that I watched this year. I've given special awards to games that I played this year. And I revealed my final list, my top 3 and or 4 of the anime that I watched this year, my personal anime of the year for 2024. So, at long last, finally, as always, because it always seems to take me way too long, it's finally time for me to reveal what my final list, my top 3 and or 4 is of the games that I played, my personal game of the year for 2024. It was not a great year this year when it comes to the games that I played. It's not like I didn't play good games. I did, obviously. I'm playing one that is surprising the hell out of me right now, and is that I'm enjoying a hell of a lot more than I honestly expected to. It's unfortunate, really, that things didn't work out differently. It might have ended up in my final list as well. I don't know if I'll end up finishing it by the end of this year, but I may have to make a slight exception if somehow I do and allow it to be viable for 2025, even if I technically finish it this year, because obviously I'm revealing my final list now. Each year, obviously, is going to be different at the end of the day. So, as always, as usual, as per normal, this is just my own personal list that I'm basing off of the video games that I personally played this year. So it's just my personal opinion at the end of the day. Everyone can have their own opinions, so I can have my opinion. Formulate and create your own list out of all of the video games that you personally played this year or anime that you watched or whatever, kind of like how I did, and make your own list. That's basically what you need to do and what you should do at the end of the day if you don't personally like or agree with my final list. To be completely honest with you, I don't really like my final list either, but that's only because nothing really quote unquote stood out. There was no major standout this year. Last year was kind of similar, but only because Near Replicant was an amazing game, obviously. It was just the grind for the platinum that really ruined the experience of that game for me. That was really the only sort of asterisk or thing of note. If the platinum hadn't have been that ridiculous and that grindy, then it definitely would have been the standout last year. Unfortunately, that just wasn't the case, and honestly, this year was arguably kind of worse, except for a couple of exceptions. Very obvious exceptions. And sure, you could make the argument very biased exceptions. There's a hint for you. You really think I care? Well, since it's my own personal list, no, I don't care. I don't care. And if I have the opportunity to do situations like this to give praise to games that fucking deserve it, there's no other way for me to say it. I'm sorry. You can fully expect me to do so. You can fully expect me to do so. Each situation again is going to be different at the end of the day, because I'm going to go ahead and let you know right now before I do my full thoughts video for the next game. Digimon Survive is literally the next game I will be playing once I finish my current game, finally, at long last. I could be biased for that as well, but it's going to depend on a lot of things and depend on how I feel about that game and what my personal experience with it is, and the fact that I unfortunately have to play it twice. Ridiculous. Just for the true ending, but I will do it for the goddamn true ending. If it is required, I will do so. Again, each situation is different. There are always going to be exceptions, and I could continue on and on. Exceptions for exceptions, and exceptions for exceptions for exceptions. You get the point. So, each situation is going to be different. I'm not sitting here saying that Digimon Survive is going to win my personal game of the year for 2025, because in all brutal honesty, it probably won't. It probably won't. And you're going to see why when I get to my most anticipated. But that's not relevant right now. That's not important right now. And I'm probably rambling too much already. So, without further ado, it is time for me to reveal my final list, my top 3 and or 4 games that I personally played this year for 2024, and my personal game of the year. Just as a quick review or summary of the games that I played this year, that has changed slightly, but it's only changed slightly in terms of my final list. But once again, the games that I did play this year are as follows: Life is Strange True Colors for the PlayStation 5, Tales of Arise and its DLC for the PlayStation 5. It's okay. It was disappointment of the year anyway, and it's not in my final list. Who cares? Boy, I like burying things. It's fun, I'm sorry. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond for the Switch, Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus for the PlayStation 4 on my PlayStation 5 via backwards compatibility, Pokemon Legends Arceus for the Switch, Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin for the PlayStation 5, Kirby and the Forgotten Land for the Switch, the Sly Cooper franchise, all of them, the PS3 trilogy and Thieves in Time, so the entire Sly Cooper franchise for the PlayStation 3, which I'm counting as one game, which I have done in the past. Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series for the PlayStation 5. And last, but certainly not least, Live Alive for the Nintendo Switch, which is currently ongoing. So there's your answer as to the game that I'm enjoying a hell of a lot more than I was expecting to. So, unfortunate. Unfortunate. Nothing to be done at the end of the day. Can't really control how each year goes. Lessons have been learned. Lessons have been implemented. If I don't like a game, I'm not going to play the DLC. If a game is too hard or you can only play a DLC on the hardest difficulty, I'm probably not going to play it. I'm just saying, I'm sorry. So each situation, as always, like I just said, is going to be different, so... Oh well, all that really matters, despite what it may seem and despite what others may think, I do try to learn and I try not to repeat the same mistakes. Sometimes I will, that's kind of obvious and, kind of human, but I at least try to learn from my mistakes and not do the same thing multiple times. So with that out of the way, with that said, it's time for my final list. The top 3 and or 4 games that I played this year for 2024 out of all of those games that I just mentioned to you. Similarly to my personal anime of the year, really you could say it's a top three, but just like every year, just like with my final list for my personal anime of the year, there is an overall special mention, which you could pretty much say is de facto number four. And this year's overall special mention for my personal game of the year, de facto number four, is pretty much the same situation as my personal anime of the year, and is the game that won the special award for underrated game of the year. In other words, Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus. Because personally, it deserves to be on my final list because it was just too damn good and it surprised the hell out of me. If I had an anime that surprised me, and surprise of the year was in replacement of underrated game or anime of the year, then it definitely would have won that instead of underrated game of the year. It definitely would have won surprise of the year because it's the first Falcom game that I played. Because the Trails of Cold Steel games are too goddamn hard. I'm sorry. It was the first Falcom game that I've played that I actually enjoyed playing and didn't struggle with immensely, ridiculously so. A ridiculous amount of struggling on my behalf. Obviously, that's on me at the end of the day. Clearly, I have no idea how the Trails game works, but it's a little too convoluted as well, so that's not really on me. At least if you ask me, just me, obviously, just me. The point is, this game is really goddamn fun and really goddamn good, and I enjoyed it a hell of a lot. Once again, a hell of a lot more than I honestly expected to. And once again, just like with the Digimon Cyber Sleuth games, and hopefully with Digimon Survive, TBD, it did not matter in any way whatsoever that there wasn't an English dub because I enjoyed the hell out of the game way too goddamn much. I'm sorry, I just did. I personally enjoyed the story. It was a little bit of a mystery, and I just really enjoyed it overall. There is obviously I guess if you want to call it the mega bias, where I really like action games because I just do. I'm sorry. Because this is an action game and one of the few action games that Falcom has done. Although, obviously, some of the later Trails games um, do start to have more of an action uh, related system or combat system in some instances, at least. So we'll see what happens when I get to those games in particular. But other than those later games, this was the first action game Falcom did, and I really enjoyed it. I'm sorry. Did I struggle at times? Yes. But it wasn't as bad as the Cold Steel franchise. And I didn't really get that many game overs, or really any game overs at all in this particular game. Yes, I got close, but that's kind of what items are for. So, and obviously near the end of the game, it was probably the hardest, but that's when you use your best items and you save up your best items for that part, and that's what I did. The point is, I enjoyed the hell out of this game. It was really goddamn good. The story was really good and really interesting at times. And there's really nothing else for me to say other than I just really enjoyed it. I really did. I can't really say anything else or praise it more because it's a really goddamn good game. I'm sorry. The Metacritic score and the user score is not correct in any way whatsoever. I'm sorry. This game is great. This game's great. So it deserves to be on my final list. Just like Demon Slayer Hashira Training Arc deserved to be on my final list. Yes. Yes, it did. There is one change. There was one change that I made to my final list when I finished a certain game. Come on, you know where we're going. You know where we're going. One change that I made because normally in my final lists for both my personal anime of the year and personal game of the year, there's at least one thing on the final list that won a special award. This has been the case for the last couple to even several years now. But because of the not so great amount of games that I played this year, there actually was two games on my final list that won a special award. But thankfully, you really should be happy that I made a change because now there's something on my final list that didn't win a special award that deserves to be on my final list because it fucking deserves it and it fucking deserves all the praise in the goddamn word. It's Klonoa. What the fuck else did you expect? There's the point for you. There's the point. You want to know why this is on my final list? It's because of the second game. It's because of the second game. Klonoa 2, Lunate's Veil, and how goddamn good that game is, and how much it reminded me of how goddamn good the second game is. I am so glad it reminded me of how goddamn good it was, and I'm gonna keep saying it because it deserves that praise. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You want to call me biased? Go right ahead. You are absolutely right. Hey, at least I'm admitting it. At least I'm admitting it. It's why it's my own personal list, and I literally said to make your own list. These games are fucking great. I'm sorry. Nobody has still been able to give me an example of a platformer or a platforming franchise that has a goddamn as amazing story other than this. Sonic games have their moment, sure, and other franchises have their moment, sure. This is goddamn amazing. It's goddamn amazing. It's depressing. It's emotional. It doesn't. It's. Don't expect a yay happiness ending. One of the few platformers, when platformers first started, that was shockingly dark. Even the second game, in many ways. It's goddamn amazing. I'm sorry. It just is for me, especially the second game. My God, man. My God. My God. This game and this franchise deserves so much more than what it has been given and what it is being given. And I am never going to not call that bullshit out. I'm not going to do that right now. Well, maybe I will here in a bit, but I'm not going to go on a tangent about it because it's just the same thing time and time again, over and over again, and I don't like to be a broken record, like I have stated several times. This franchise is fucking amazing. You cannot sit there and say this franchise sucks unless you play it for yourself. Then, if you play it for yourself and say it sucks, okay, fine. I'm glad you have that opinion. Mine just happens to be massively different. It reminded me way too much of how goddamn amazing these games are, particularly the second game. So I'm sorry, it deserves to be on my final list. If you want to know what was number 3 before I made this change, it was literally the Sly Cooper franchise. But I struggled way too much with that game. I struggled with the first game of these two as well. Not so much the second game, yes, at times, but I struggled a lot more in the first one than the second one. So, and the fact that it's just so goddamn amazing, and the second game reminded me of how goddamn amazing it is. It bumped Sly Cooper completely out of my list. I'm sorry, it just did. I want Sly Cooper to come back. I stated that in my special awards. I will state it here again now. I just did. I want Sly Cooper to come back, but I want this to come back as well. Honestly, I want this one to come back more, but we're dealing with fucking Scamco, so, that's clearly out the window. For me, it's my own personal list. Deal with it. I'm okay. I'm sorry. Cry me a river. Okay, I'm sorry. It deserves to be on my final list. It's fucking amazing and deserves so much more than what it has gotten and what it is getting. So, for the final time, fuck you, Scamco. Fuck you, Scamco. So now we're to my final two. At long last, we are to my final two games. My personal game of the year runner up, the second best game I played this year, and my personal game of the year, the best game that I played this year. So, what are the final two? What are the final two? That is the question. It's a massive difference than what has been winning in my personal end of the year lists, with the exception of one, I suppose. Well, at least when it comes to last year, it's a massive difference. Maybe not so much the year before that, but definitely last year. My personal game of the year runner up, the second best the second best game that I personally played this year. Despite all the ridiculous struggles that I had with it, and the ridiculous bullshit with the collectibles, or the specific collectibles in that particular game, at the end of the day, I couldn't really let that affect how goddamn good the game was and how goddamn amazing the game was when you compare it to literally everything else. Because at the end of the day, yeah, I would have to sit here and say, yeah, it's probably the best game of the entire franchise. I'm sorry, it just is. And it's Kirby in the Forgotten Land. Lots of platformers. Lots of platformers, except for the one that won. Lots of platformers. Yeah, this is probably the best Kirby game of the entire franchise. I'm sorry. Amazing 3D, amazing abilities, amazing bosses, great moments, great cutscenes. Even the story was at least slightly interesting in many ways. Hell, I can't believe what I'm about to say. Don't have a heart attack here, but even the goddamn post game was interesting. That's you having a heart attack of me praising post game, and even playing post game for that matter. It's too goddamn good. It's too goddamn good. I'm sorry. Upgrading the copy abilities, yes, give me more of that shit. Best graphics of the entire franchise, yes, give me more of that shit. Gameplay is amazing, yes, give me more of that shit. It's just too good. It's just too good. So I can't really allow the ridiculous bullshit that I dealt with in this game when it came to the Waddle Dees and how ridiculous some of it was and the requirements of some of it clearly was. I just can't let that affect it. I'm sorry. I just can't when it comes to an overall final list for me. It'll affect it when I give an overall final full thoughts of the game overall, but when it comes to a final list, I'm sorry, I can't really let that affect it. I'm sorry, I just can't. The game was too good, too goddamn amazing overall, and probably the best of the entire franchise for me to let it to have something like that affect it to that degree. Again, just me, just my own personal list, just the way I personally feel. More of this. More of this, please. I'm sorry. Do another similar game. It doesn't have to be Forgotten Land 2, because that would be kind of dumb, honestly. Just more 3D Kirby games in the style of Forgotten Land. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking. More. Keep the upgradable copy abilities, is the point that I'm trying to make here. Keep that. That shit's great. I love that. Keep that. Let's see some of that for some other abilities. Beam, mirror, leaf, so on and so forth. Let's see what upgraded versions of those abilities look like. That would be fantastic and goddamn amazing. And even I have to admit that. Even I have to admit that. More of that. Just more of the style of Kirby in the Forgotten Land, please. Don't know what happened to that so-called reported and or leaked 2D game. Maybe they'll reveal it at the Switch 2 event or the next Nintendo Direct that also includes Switch 1 games, but don't know what the hell happened to that. So you can't really count that, unfortunately, but just more of Forgotten Land-esque Kirby games in general. It was too goddamn good, I'm sorry. For me personally, it just deserves to be my personal game of the year runner-up. The second best game that I played this year. So now, it's time for me to reveal, finally, at long last, what won my personal game of the year for 2024. What the best game that I feel like I personally played this year, out of a year that nothing really stood out the most. So, out of a year where really nothing stood out the most, what did stand out the most? Well, at the end of the day, it came down to what I had the most fun playing and what was just the most fun overall, and things that I did in it that I literally don't do in the franchise and literally have never done in the franchise and probably will literally never again do in the franchise unless it is required because of the game in general and specifically. For the first time since probably before I started doing videos for this, when I just kind of did my own list on my own without videos for it. For the first time since probably a certain 3DS remake, a certain franchise that is overwhelmed by a certain whiny ass fan base, has once again finally won my personal game of the year. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. I really am. Although I'm really not sorry because it was really the only standout this year. It really was. It was the only standout. I'm sorry. And it was the best game that I personally played. Some people, some of my Discord friends are probably not going to be happy about this, but I'm sorry. It was the best game that I played this year. My personal game of the year for 2024 is Pokemon Legends Arceus. I'm sorry. It just is. It just was. Probably the best Pokemon game, maybe not I've ever played, but let's just say it was probably the best Pokemon game I've played in a really long time. I enjoyed the hell out of Pokemon Sword as well. I had a hell of a lot of fun playing it. I'm sorry, but this one is definitely really good. Gameplay is amazing. The first time I've ever caught a shit ton of Pokemon. The first time I've ever completed a Pokedex in a Pokemon game. Story is a little slow, obviously, honestly. Gets really good around the end though, and even some of the stuff after the main story is really goddamn good as well, and even challenging in many ways. I had to use legendaries. I'm sorry. Isn't that kind of the point, though? I mean, you gotta catch all the Pokemon anyway, and it's hard, so you might as well use the legendaries because you have to catch them anyway, and it's kind of what they're there for. I'm sorry, this game was too goddamn good and too goddamn fun, and I did a shit ton of stuff in it that I've never done in literally any other Pokemon game. Catch a shit ton of Pokemon, complete a Pokedex, constantly swap my team in and out because really only 3 Pokemon were mainstays in my team, that being Hisuian Typhlosion, Hisuian Braviary, and Hisuian Electrode. And then the other 3 were just swapped in and out constantly. So I didn't really have a set team. But isn't that kind of the point? If you're going to catch a shit ton of Pokemon anyway, to swap things out constantly? I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me because that's the first time I've ever done something like that as well. Because when I played Brilliant Diamond, I can tell you this much, I did have a set team. If you recall from that Full Thoughts video. But yeah, it was too goddamn good and too goddamn fun. I'm sorry, it just was. I'm not saying the story was great. Kinda kinda meh, but it was just the gameplay mostly. The gameplay, the Xenoblade-esque nature of it, of having to run away and avoid way too high-leveled Pokemon and level yourselves up to be able to deal with them or to take them on, or at least to have better Pokeballs in order to catch them so you don't have to deal with them, or to grind up your rank or star rank or whatever you want to call that little system they had in Legends Arceus, in order to be able to have a higher chance of catching the high leveled Pokemon so you don't have to deal with them. Even battling those Pokemon was very fun and very interesting in many ways. I gained respect for a lot of Pokemon in this game. Drapion, Electrode, Braviary, a lot of other Pokemon that I gained respect for. I'm sorry, this really was as good as everyone claimed it was, and is as good as everyone claims it still is. It just is. I'm sorry, okay? I had too much fun playing this game. I looked forward to playing this game. I played this game a hell of a lot more than I thought I would, and I would continue to play it kind of similarly to the year when I played Xenoblade Chronicles 2, when I would play it for a hell of a lot more longer than I probably should have. It's just too good. It's just too good. I'm sorry. It's just too good. I mean, Pokemon has not won my personal game of the year since probably Omega Ruby back in the 3DS era. That's how long it's been. That's how long it's been. Sun and Moon was a massive ass disappointment for me. Sword and Shield was fun and was my special mention that particular year, but it wasn't good enough to win because I played other games that were just far better that particular year. Nothing was going to beat this game. That's me being brutally honest with you and to you. Nothing was going to beat this game because nothing else really stood out. Other than, let me just grab my list here again. Other than, like, Kirby and Sly Cooper and then Klonoa and even Live Alive to an extent, those were the other standouts this year, but nothing was going to beat this game because I enjoyed the hell out of it. I had a hell of a lot of fun playing it. Got really goddamn good around the end, story-wise, shockingly. Especially with those with those themes. My God, it really was Xenoblade-esque. They really took inspiration from Xenoblade and obviously Zelda Breath of the Wild, obviously. But that felt more Xenoblade-esque to me than Breath of the Wild, but I didn't play Breath of the Wild, so that's just me. But it was too goddamn good. I'm sorry. It just was. It was too goddamn good. I know I gave Klonoa a higher score, but that's biased. Hey, I'm being brutally honest with you again. It's a biased score. So even though my personal score for Klonoa was higher, this was the game I enjoyed playing the most. I'm sorry, it just was. It just is. Too good. Too good. Some really good story parts, some really good moments. Shit that I've never done in previous Pokemon games. There's nothing else for me to really sing, and I'm just repeating myself at this point. So it was just too damn good. I'm sorry, it just was. Everyone was right, and I hate it when the majority is right, but when the majority is right, I'm going to state when the majority was right, and they were right about this game. I'm sorry, okay? I don't know how many times I have to say that, but this was just the best game that I personally played this year. If things had worked out differently, who knows, but things didn't. They certainly didn't. Obviously, clearly. The game's too good. I'm sorry. The game's too good. I had too much fun running around, catching the Pokemon, doing the side quests. It was basically Pokemon Xenoblade for me because I got massively distracted by the side quests and wouldn't do the main quests for an extended amount of time. It was too good and it was too fun. I'm sorry. And it had good story moments at times as well. It's just how I feel. It's just how I feel. It's why it's my own personal list. It's why you need to make your own personal list. It is what it is. Nothing else for me to really say. Nothing else really to say. It's too damn good. It's too damn good. It really was too damn good. So there you go. Congratulations, Pokemon Legends Arceus. You are my personal Game of the Year for 2024. And just as a quick re-review before I end up going for too much longer, once again, my final list, my top 3 and or 4 games that I played for 2024 is the overall special mention. De facto number 4 was Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus for PlayStation 4. The third best game that I played this year was Klonoa Fantasy Reverie Series. I played it on PlayStation 5. Game of the Year 2024 runner-up, the second best game that I played this year, Kirby and the Forgotten Land for the Nintendo Switch. And my personal Game of the Year for 2024, I'm sorry, is Pokemon Legends Arceus. I'm sorry. I really am. Typhlosion is still my favorite Pokemon. I'm sorry. Cry me a river. That's not gonna change either. That shit I do not give a fuck about. I'm sorry. I don't care. Don't know why you expect me to not have that Pokemon be my favorite because of that bullshit. It's not gonna happen, I can tell you that much. So there you go, my top 3 and 4 games that I personally played this year in 2024. So that's it. That's all of my final lists. Now we can finally start talking about 2025. Aren't you happy? Oh, God. Boy, do I have some things to talk about when it comes to most anticipated. Normally, I have 3. This year, I only have 2. We'll talk about that next time. So until then, that's all I got for you. Next time, my most anticipated for 2025. But we'll talk more about that then. So until then, this is Mega Champ saying next time I'll be providing you with more unlimited guidance. I'm sorry, a Pokemon game won my personal game of the year. It's gonna happen sometimes. It just happened to happen this year when nothing else really stood out and there wasn't really a huge standout. I guess it's a consolation prize, if you want to call it that, but it was too goddamn good and I loved it way too much, so it was the game that I enjoyed playing the most and had the most fun playing and had some really goddamn good moments in, so it's why it's my own personal list, so. See you next time for most anticipated 2025. Bye.